The question I get over and over again about my art is, how do I get the rich, thick texture in my artwork with acrylic paint? So hang out with me a little bit today in my studio. I'm Stacy Spangler. I'm a mixed media artist out of Arkansas, and I'm going to show you a few tricks about getting thick texture with your acrylic paint. I love to create art that you just want to reach out and touch it. I think I'm kind of a touchy-feely person, so like people always say, "Can I touch your art?" And I'm like, "Yes, of course." That's why I make it that way, because I love feeling fabrics and walls and always rubbing my hands across things. So, of course, that kind of naturally transfers into my work. And I also think that having texture in my art helps me to let go of some of my perfectionism. It's kind of hard to make something too perfect when you've got a bumpy texture underneath. So there's several things that I do. I'm going to give you my 5 top ways at the end that I use, techniques that I use in my art to create texture, but my favorite way is what I'm showing you right now, and it's by using an acrylic medium. You can do this several different ways. I'm using a stencil here, as you can see, and just applying it to the background. So instead of just having a plain white background, it's got that extra element of texture to it, which I love. Just gives it a little bit more interest and kind of makes you take a second look, and of course makes you want to reach out and touch it. So as you can see, I'm using this here, but there's lots of ways to use texture, and there is a lot of texture out there. Acrylic mediums. You can check out my Amazon store, and I have most of my favorite products. I also have a course if you want to get down and get all the details and down into the nitty-gritty of texture in your artwork. I do have a very comprehensive course called Touchable Texture, and it actually takes you through all these different steps in detail, which is really helpful. And you actually create 6 different pieces of art. I take you through just some technique pieces of art where we create small pieces, and then we create a large piece at the end. But you can see here I've done several different textures with the stencils, so that is definitely one way that you can add a little bit more interest to just those flat areas. And then there are actually some techniques you can use with glazing where you can even come and add a second layer over that texture once it dries. So anyway, I hope you find this helpful. It's really fun to do. I love the end result. And so I'll let you enjoy this for a little bit, and then we'll go over the other techniques that I really like to use in my art at the end. And I will give you information about my course if you'd like to learn more. as you can see, I am just using a metal palette knife to apply this paste. It's actually a paste that is made for acrylic paints, and I prefer the Golden brand. There are a lot of options out there, and I do cover that in my course. There are even some really inexpensive options if you're just a hobbyist or just starting out doing this that I recommend to use instead of the paste. But I use the Golden light molding paste. There are a lot of different ones. You can get it with fiber, you can get it with sand. Great options out there. I just use the light and apply that with my palette knife. You do have to let this dry. I usually try to let it dry in a climate controlled environment for at least 24 hours before I paint over it or seal it. It doesn't dry hard and rigid because it is a product made for acrylic paint. There's a little bit of flexibility to it, so it dries a little bit spongy and it will absorb paint. So sometimes you have to put a couple of layers of paint if you are actually painting over it. But it dries really nice. It does, if you mix it with paint, it does give a little, it's opaque, so it will change the color a little bit of your paint, so it's not transparent or anything like that. So you do have to consider that if you're adding the paint to it. Here I have just mixed it with a little bit of white paint, and I added it to the texture and then applied it with the stencil. But you can just also use the plain texture and paint over it if you'd rather do it that way. And a lot of times I do that on my base layer, and then I apply a wash over that, and that gives a really nice base texture to start with, and you can kind of build up your layers from there. So I'm getting ready here to put up on the screen my top 5 ways that I use texture in my art, and all of these are covered in my Touchable Textures course. If you'd like more information, you can go to my Podia site and get more details. It's broken down into 6-week sections, and so it's a great course if you want to learn more about texture. And here are my tricks. Thank you for joining me today, and give me a subscribe and a thumbs up if you like the content from today.